Alright guys, today me and Gooch are out scouting. We're trying to get ready for opening day, and that's what this whole video is going to be about. If y'all have watched our channel for a while, you've noticed that we do lots of aggressive scouting. We dive into bedding areas and blow everything up, but we're not doing that today. Because a lot of you are going to be hunting opening day, which in your state could be like beginning of September, could be mid-September, could be early October. And right now we're in the first week of August. So we're gonna give you all some tips on what you can do to scout for opening day. That way you have a good spot to go the first couple days of season. So we're gonna slide down the edge of these beans and start scouting. If y'all like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. Let's get cracking. Been walking along the edge of the field right here, as y'all can see behind me. And we hit this, what looks like a scrape. And I know it's early August. A lot of you are like, oh, deer aren't scraping this time of year. That ain't true. They do scrape. They use licking branches almost non-stop. Now, they may not be as aggressive about it this time of year as they are in the fall, but if you look down here at this ground, it's all churned up. And we just had a bunch of rain last week, wasn't it? Last Friday. So all this sign has been left since that big rain. I'm seeing big buck tracks in and around this. And if you look real close right here, you can see where they've been nibbling on the end of these branches. And in fact, if you look up here, see how some of these branches are new growth, Gooch? See that? This is more than likely a perennial scrape tree. It's secluded on this backside here, and there's just tracks everywhere. I would put a camera in front of it if I could, but there's not really a good place to set one up. If you have like a stick and pick or a little fence post or something, that could work, just as long as it's legal to do on your public lands. If you're on private land, then you're good to go, obviously, but that's a good find. We'll mark that and keep going along this edge. We're not pushing into the bedding areas today. We're just walking the edge of these beans. As you can see behind us, the deer have been feeding out here a bunch. I mean, we just filmed a small buck a few minutes ago. He was out here in the middle of the day feeding. But what we're doing is we're checking all these entry trails in and out of these beans. We're not going in there, but right here, there's a bunch of big tracks leading down into this bottom behind us. There's thick cover, all kinds of nasty stuff in there. And the reason why we're looking at these entry trails is these are the spots where we're going to put our trail cameras. These are the spots that we're going to try to observe right before the season starts. As you can see, this is a big old field behind us, and we can get at a high point across this thing and watch clear down into these back corners where these exit trails are at. And you got to remember, if you're hunting opening day or opening weekend, there's a good chance these deer have been unpressured up to that point. So you may be able to capitalize on hunting spots like this that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get away with. Because a lot of times we're talking about hunting the security cover, hunting the bedding cover way back in there. But if you're brand new to hunting and you're just trying to get out there and harvest a deer, spots like this are awesome the first week of season. I mean, that trail right there is beat down. There's all kinds of deer coming out of that bedding area and coming out into these beans. So say it's the day before season, you get up at the top of that hill back there, up in a tree, just to observe this field with binos or spotting scope or something, and you see several deer come out of one of these exit trails. Maybe you can come in on opening day, opening evening, get set up right there and shoot a deer. Because like I said, these deer have not been pressured up to this point. And that's why we're talking quiet. That's why we're not being real intrusive. We're just walking the edge of the field looking for tracks, putting cameras up and whatnot. And that'll be the next thing I show you, is where we like to set our trail cameras up to help make a plan for opening day.
This is going right down to that.
Quick suggestion, don't put it in a thorny locust tree.
Alright, we were just talking about the exit trails out here along the edge of the beans, and we started following those back in a little bit, not very far. I mean, the bean field is, I don't know, 15 yards away. And we're still a long ways from the thick cover where the deer are bedding. Me and Gooch just put this camera up, what would you say that is? 9 feet?
Yeah.
8-9 feet up in this tree behind us, overlooking these trails that we're standing on right here. And the idea behind this camera is that we can come in 2 camera setups like this on opening day, close to these food sources, in between food and bedding, the beans being the food, the thick cover down here in the bottom being the bedding, we can check these cameras on opening day. And if they have deer moving through here during daylight on this trail, then we might be able to just set up right in here pretty close to where this camera is at. I mean, don't overthink this stuff. You're trying to get deer moving in daylight that you can hunt as soon as the season comes in. And if you set up cameras in situations like this, then you can just rotate through them on opening day. The trick here is do not come in here and check these things a week before opening day, 2 weeks before opening day. Right now it's mid-August. We're gonna hang that camera there and it's gonna sit there for a month and a half until we come in here the first couple days of season. We wanna get our scent out of this area so that the deer can get back to feeling comfortable in this spot before it comes time to hunt them. If you're in here every 2 weeks checking that camera, you're leaving a bunch of scent in front of it, the deer are gonna get onto your game just like they do during hunting season, and they're gonna start avoiding this spot during daylight.
The other thing about putting your camera on a trail like that is it's really hard to find an area out in this field where we might be able to capture all the deer coming to this, but if we know where bucks might be bedding, we have a higher possibility of catching bucks consistently coming through this area as opposed to just setting it out here on the field edge and hoping they walk by that certain spot.
Yeah, because there's a trail along the edge of the field edge right here with tracks going along it, but that doesn't necessarily give us an idea of where the buck is bedding or where the deer is bedding in general. When you set it up over these individual trails and crossings like this, you're going to get less deer on camera, but you might get a better idea of where you should put your bow stand for opening day, or where you should set up with your bow for opening day, whether it's in a stand or on the ground or whatever. So gotta remember, you're archery hunting, you all got to get close. All right, so before we move on to the next tip, we're just going to recap everything we've done here. We came down here into this secluded bean field. This is public land where everybody can hunt, but the deer are obviously comfortable using it right now because it's not hunting season. There's not a bunch of people down here. We've seen no boot tracks the whole time, and only deer tracks around this bean field. If you have a food source like this on public or private land, it's good to target these things during the early part of the season, especially opening week. But like we said in the open, we're not going in here and diving into these bedding areas and blowing all the deer out because we want these deer to feel comfortable on this bean field. We're leaving a minimal amount of scent around the edge of the bean field. We're just checking for entry trails. We're hanging cameras on those entry trails that we can come in and systematically check the day that we plan to hunt on opening week. And we're also looking for observation points that we could get into. Up here is the edge of this bean field, and there's several big trees up there. And there's not crops planted on the other side of those trees. So we could actually slide in here a day or two before season, pop up in one of those trees with a saddle or stand or something, and overlook the majority of this bean field. That's what you want to do before you go in there and check your trail cameras. So you get up here and you observe this thing for a couple evenings. Maybe you see some bucks or does or whatever you want to shoot coming out of one of these exit trails, and then that's going to give you an idea of where to set up your first day hunting. So it's low impact scouting. You're not coming in here and blowing all these deer off. You want them to feel as comfortable as possible, because trust me, after a week or two of season, hunters are going to do that for you. They're going to come in here and they're going to blow a lot of the deer off of these food sources. And as it gets into October, deer, especially bucks, are going to stop showing up on these things during daylight. But sometimes that opening weekend you can capitalize on it. Good grief, look at the tracks there. Big old buck track, look at this. I say buck track. I don't know if it's actually a buck or not, but it's just a huge deer track in general, which lends itself to being a buck more times than not. I guess there's enormous does too. Now we're gonna go do some observation, see if we can spot some bucks. One thing that we didn't mention a lot back there in the bean field was mature bucks. If you're trying to hunt a mature buck on a field edge, you've got an opportunity, very slim one a lot of times early in the season like that, but more often than not, mature bucks are not coming out there in daylight. However, that's why we showed you those camera setups back there. If you check that camera on those exit trails leading off of the field and you're getting mature bucks just after dark coming up past the camera, there's a good chance they're a little bit deeper in the bedding areas there. But you at least have something to go off of then. You know how those bucks are entering and exiting those fields from the camera. So Gooch and I are gonna go get the spotters and go out this evening and see if we can spot some velvet bucks.
Black ice, your smell of choice?
That's my go-to. That and Village Candle malt cider. Alright, this evening, Gooch and I are doing some long-range observations. This is stuff that we do either from the ground like this with the glass, or we'll climb up in a tree or try to get to a high point where we can see a long distance. Right now we're overlooking this cut hayfield where there's a bunch of alfalfa and clover in it. Very good early season food sources. And we can see several hundred yards across and we got a little buck and 2 does already out in front of us right now. And they're looking back behind them like there's more deer coming. Yep, there is more deer coming, Gooch. More does coming out, I think. And all these deer are coming out of one spot in the field. But we're backed off of them far enough from here, using the spotting scopes, so that we're not intrusive. We're not going to spook these deer. We're just watching them from a distance, and if they start heading this way, we'll back off into the cover and get the heck out of here. But this is something that's a good idea to do right before your season starts. If you can get out the evening before and you can get intel like this, that can help you out a lot, whether it's overlooking a big food source like this alfalfa field, or whether it's big tall grass field of some kind where you can see deer actually stand up out of their beds. Either way, whenever you get to a good vantage point where you can cover a lot of country with your eyes, you're going to put less pressure on the deer that way, and you're going to observe potentially more hunting spots in one evening. We better shut up because these things are coming out in the field right now. Cruising around and found some biggins. Nice bucks right out here on some private land. Covering ground, observing from the car. As you can tell, we got the spotter mounted on the window. Or observing from a distance in those fields like what we were doing a while ago. More time you spend out here that week before season, 2 weeks before season, whatever, the more stuff you're going to learn when it comes time to make up a strategy for opening day. That's it for this video, guys. Hopefully y'all enjoyed it. We're going to film a little bit more of these bucks and head to the ranch.